Authorities are looking to curb the spread of vaping from taking root in a generation. Last year, there were about 8,000 vaping-related offences. Now, this is an increase of close to 43% from the 5,600 in 2022. Most of these were for the purchase, use and possession of vapes, which carries a fine of up to $2,000. In view of the growing problem, questions were raised in Parliament about the size of the enforcement team at the Health Sciences Authority, the lead agency. The Health Ministry says that it is taking a multi-agency approach because the issue cuts across many areas. Now, this includes checks for illegal imports at borders, as well as tackling online advertisements and sales.
The schools also work with us to actually look at education and informing the public about it. So these are some of the various efforts of how this multi-agency collaboration effort works. We do need to take that approach of working together with all these other agencies collectively, so that we can have a more effective response to the growing problem.
For more on what a multi-agency approach to curbing vaping might look like, we're joined by Dr. Yvette Vender Eyck. She's assistant professor at the NUS Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. Dr. Vender Eyck, Singapore taking a multi-agency approach to clamp down on vaping. What would such an approach look like?
Well, I think generally it's good to advocate for a holistic approach to tackling the vaping problem, because there are different layers of the problem, right? I mean, we have youth who are picking it up because of the way that it's marketed on social media, because of the way that vaping has become normalized in many other countries. And then at the same time, there's also current smokers who are turning to vaping to try and quit or cut down on smoking. So in general, it's one of those complex issues where, yes, different cooperation from different agencies is going to be necessary.
It is a complex issue and it has been normalised in some instances, Dr. Vender Eyck. I mean, it's prevalent. It's been prevalent for some years now. But there are these efforts, these multi-agency efforts to kind of tackle it. What's the root cause, though, for vaping in the first place? And are we addressing that in our efforts to curb this?
Well, the root cause of vaping generally is the vaping industry, basically the industry and their aggressive targeting, especially of young people, right? And the reason why they do this is because, I mean, when you look at tobacco business, this has been declining now, right? And I think they know that sooner or later, tobacco business is going to pretty much disappear because more and more countries are setting tobacco endgame targets to be tobacco-free by a certain year. So the industry has to sustain its business somehow, which is where the vaping problem comes in. So I do think that and the way that they're marketing, especially to young people, that is the root cause of the vaping problem and also its normalization in many societies.
All right, you mentioned the need for a holistic approach. So of all the things you've mentioned, one thing you keep coming back to is the marketing, the aggressive targeting of the young, the marketing of vaping as an acceptable, a cool way to smoke and yet not in some way have all the disadvantages of tobacco. So when you look at a holistic approach, perhaps more than anything else, it's stopping this targeting that will prove the most effective.
Yeah, definitely. And that is a very, very tricky one in today's context, because much of the marketing now is on social media, right? Especially for the targeting of the younger generation. And social media content, it's very difficult to regulate when it's coming in from other countries. So one issue that we're seeing a lot in Singapore also is that the kind of content that young people are exposed to, it does very much promote vaping. And a lot of it is coming from nearby countries like Malaysia or Indonesia, or coming from, further overseas. So I do think there has to be some cross-border cooperation or cooperation with those social media platforms that are responsible for this content, platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And then also, spreading better educational messages to help neutralize some of that content and essentially to help normalize a vape-free lifestyle for the younger generation.
Dr. Vender Eyck, cross-border cooperation aside, are there other policy measures perhaps or other types of regulation that we could adapt from what other countries have learnt about how they tackle vaping?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, in Singapore, vaping is already illegal, right? So enforcement is one side of it. But I think beyond that, whenever you have a law in place, it's very important for people to understand why that law is there, right? So that's where education comes in, and where education, especially on the harms of vaping, on basically evidence on how it supports smoking cessation efforts, which actually, evidence so far points that vaping is not really an effective smoking cessation aid, because most people that they're trying to quit smoking and then move to vaping and to become dual users. So I think that kind of educational messages is very important to help raise awareness among current smokers. And then also for the younger generation, the ones who are now picking up vaping because they think it's harmless, I think educating them. And I think what has been done in quite a good way in some other countries, especially in the United States, is some of the efforts to help denormalize vaping. And they've done this very well with smoking too. So a lot of this is, again, targeting the younger generations. It's using influencers, using the social media platforms. And essentially what their goal is to normalize vape-free lifestyle. So I think that kind of positive message is something that we could explore more in Singapore as well.
So in other words, if the whole function of this holistic approach is to denormalize a vaping lifestyle, to legalize vaping would be an anathema to that? Or is it possible that by legalizing vaping, we create very clear boundaries? So, for example, age limits. You can vape past a certain limit, and one hopes that by that age, one is more mature, is more prepared to make better choices and not just be influenced by something you see on social media, or control the level of whatever addictive substance is included in a vaping machine. Is there any advantage at all to legalizing vaping?
Well, I think it's good to look at what's going on in other countries to help answer that question. And when we look at countries like, for instance, US and UK, I mean, the main reason why, say, in countries like the US, why there is a legal market for vaping is because at the time when e-cigarettes first came on the market, they escaped the regulations because they could not be regulated as a medicinal product or as a tobacco product. So that's how they became entrenched on markets. And then by the time they were trying to scramble for regulations, they were already entrenched, especially among the younger generation. So I think, and then now when you look at what's happening in some of these countries, the market for vaping is booming, especially among the younger generation, and countries like the UK, where they initially promoted vaping as a smoking cessation aid, where they had exactly the model that you've described, right? Where they said, okay, let's regulate it. Let's try and encourage our smokers to quit using vaping. What they're finding is actually they're just having a massive market for vaping among youth. And actually, I was just in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and I walked into convenience shops where vaping products are literally being sold next to kids' toys. And there's just vaping shops everywhere selling all sorts of vapes in different flavors. And they're really having a big problem with it among the youth. So I don't think that legalization is the way to go here. In Singapore, yes, we are witnessing a vaping problem, but I think if we were to legalize it, we would have a much, much worse problem. So I think it's really just a case of, making sure that these enforcement efforts keep up with the law, making sure that there are good education efforts that are, educating people on the actual scientific evidence with vaping, so they're not getting their information from the vaping industry, but actually from credible sources. I think that's very important. And then I think also to help denormalize vaping among the younger generation because of all of the content that they're seeing on social media, in a way to protect them from this.
Dr. van der Eyck, thank you for talking to us about the challenges of tackling this rise in vaping. That was Dr. Yvette van der Eyck. She is Assistant Professor at the NUS Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. Thank you.